I don't think I'm saying anything controversial when I say that Hollywood's in a bit of a funny place at the minute. For example, if you told me a few years ago that by the end of 2023 we'd have been watching prequels of children's films made in the 70s, I'd have spat out my hot chocolate in mirth. Apparently, this was Timothée Chalamet's response too when he heard about director Paul King's new Wonka movie, a family-friendly musical that tells the origin story of, well, you know who, from Roald Dahl's book Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. The movie, written, directed and produced by the same team as the well-received Paddington films, is claimed to be the first in an upcoming Roald Dahl universe. I'm not sure I believe that. I don't quite know how something like The Twits or James and the Giant Peach would lend itself to the same kind of treatment Wonka's had. Telling the origin story of a peach isn't likely to get bums in cinema seats, although don't give Marvel the idea just in case. But I'm going to set the puke-inducing prospect of a Dahl cinematic universe aside and give you my thoughts on Wonka as a standalone piece. As you might have guessed, the hero of the film is indeed Willy Wonka, the famous chocolatier of the Golden Tickets fame, played by Timothée Chalamet. We join him before his rise to stardom, arriving in an, as far as I could tell, unnamed city in Europe with the dream of setting up a chocolate shop and gifting his wares to the world. Unfortunately, he runs out of money soon after his arrival and ends up accidentally signing his working life away to horrible Mrs. Scrubbit, played by Olivia Coleman's laundrette. There, Wonka meets a motley crew of others who've made the same mistake, including a young orphan called Noodle, played by Calla, with whom he strikes up a particularly close friendship. Refusing to let himself be trapped by Mrs. Scrubbit, Wonka uses his inventing skills to escape and sets about making his chocolate dream come true. But in doing so, he draws the attention of Slugworth, played by Patterson Joseph, the preeminent chocolatier in town. Slugworth, with the help of a few equally despicable allies, sets about putting a stop to Wonka's new shop. But can Willy overcome these obstacles to bring his wonderful sweets to the world, and in doing so, will he help free the people he meets along the way? Like most origin stories, I still can't believe I'm saying that about Willy Wonka, at its heart, Wonka is a rags to riches tale. In that way, it mostly succeeds at what it sets out to achieve. The titular character is likeable enough, played by a Timothée Chalamet who puts a boot into his performance right from the first minute and doesn't let up. It's strange to see the serious kid from Dune and Interstellar with such energy and great comic timing, but if you're going to do a movie like this, you might as well give it your all. Chalamet does. It's also really important at the start of a rags to riches tale to get the audience to sympathise with your main character, and Wonka does this wonderfully with an opening song that boldly paints Willy's troubles onto the screen. In the best rags for riches stories too, the main antagonist is a fiend, and while the one here isn't chopping off heads and putting them on stakes, this is a children's movie after all, one with a Christmas feel even if it's not a Christmas film. Patterson Joseph is absolutely devilish as Slugsworth. The role feels similar to his excellent turn as the smooth, oily boss Alan Johnson in Peep Show, and I wonder why we don't see him in more roles. He brings the same acrobatic facial expressions that used to crack me up with Jeremy and Mark to Wonka, and is a standout of the film. Speaking of Peep Show, Wonka's a bit of a who's who of the last 20 years or so of British comedy. Olivia Coleman, an actress I've liked for a long time, goes a little over the top here as Mrs. Scrubbit, to the point that I felt like I was watching a pantomime. I know that was kind of the point, but it's a fine line between silly and schlock, and I think she skirts a little too close to the latter. Matt Lucas, someone else I generally like, plays a character I didn't think was funny at all. A bad joke one time is forgivable, a bad joke repeated 8 times, not so much. And it was lovely to see Rowan Atkinson in his first role in 5 years, but he was wasted here as a dull priest, barely harnessing his, and I don't say this lightly, physical comedy genius. However, it was Tom Davis of Murderville fame, the deep-voiced comedy giant playing Mrs. Scrubbit's partner in crime, Bleacher, who I thought stole every scene he was in, gradually becoming more and more ridiculously dressed as the film went on. Oh, and I must mention Hugh Grant's decent turn as an Oompa Loompa, just about dry enough to offset Wonka's sweet earnestness. Apparently Grant was critical of the amount of green screen he had to do while filming. I'm not quite sure what he was expecting. I can only presume he'd never seen the Oompa Loompas in the 70s movie. Visually, Wonka has the feel of something like Scorsese's Hugo, ornate but down-to-earth and clockworky. The set design evokes the time period nicely, whilst also looking a little theatrical. Feels appropriate for the musical nature of the film. Speaking of music, the songs are fine. Nothing too memorable, and the best one is reprised from the 70s film, Pure Imagination. I do think musicals work better when the songs move the plot forward at the same time as entertaining. Too many here just seem to kill time. You can't say the same about the choreography though, which was great. especially the way the film's world weaves into its musical numbers. Pots and pans at the laundrette provide a thumping drumbeat to one tune, steam vents hiss like maracas in another. It's fun to watch every time and demonstrates the love and care put into that side of the film. Fun's probably the operative word for any review of Wonka. It's a fun family film with a lot of energy and a pretty tight script that keeps itself focused on what the audience will likely want. The central relationship between Wonka and Noodle is given the main focus, as it should be, and it pays off reasonably well in the end. Add this decent story to the rest, the film's energy, its songs, dancing humour, and it all comes together nicely enough. Apparently, Wonka's got off to a decent start at the box office with a $93 million global opening weekend. I'm not sure whether that's going to be enough to ignite this Roald Dahl universe, but it suggests that if you and your family are looking for something light to watch this Christmas into New Year, you could do a lot worse. Anyway, nothing more to say. This is Movie Maverick signing out.